What's going on? Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It's your boy. Tomorrow's gonna be a fun day. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, some of you might cry, but some of you might actually end up having fun tomorrow. Cause it's gonna be one hell of a face trip tomorrow. It just depends if you're on the right side of that direction. What's going on? Good afternoon, Parachi. Good afternoon. I just thought I'd come on here, onto live pretty much. Obviously, tomorrow being such a wild card type of day, I think it's anyone's guess right now what the market is really looking for on CPI data. The assumption is obviously if CPI data comes in low, we'll see the market take another leg up. If the market doesn't like that CPI data that comes in basically at expectations or above, then it will be seemingly that the market is going to trade lower tomorrow. But nonetheless, we're gonna give what the market gives us. Hopefully, I would assume that you guys pretty much went light on your overnight positions, and that would also pretty much apply to you, Lobo. Good afternoon, sir. So it's going to be rather kind of bumpy tomorrow morning. So I will be actually trading futures tomorrow morning. I actually anticipate trading this little volatility tomorrow. We'll see how that goes for me, but that should end up being fun. But the bigger thing is just knowing the fact that obviously tomorrow being a catalyst, you want to pretty much position yourself to be rather light in terms of your position sizing. So that's pretty much the most notable thing. But also just some key things to pretty much look at from perspective also is that right now the Nasdaq to Qs, we are riding basically a 4-day green streak that we've been on. It's been a monster reversal thus far from the lows that we've put in. And so the other thing that I kind of wanted to kind of illustrate right now, after I go off a spy here in a second, is pretty much some bigger daily, weekly levels. And why am I going to look at that? Is because the primary factor is that obviously with this entire little reversal that we've had thus far, that kind of feels a little bit monstrous. And I can actually just point to a name like Tesla. I think we bottomed out right around what is it, around 104 off memory. We've already made about a 20 plus move off of Tesla from what our most recent lows is on this bear market so far. So monstrous moves across the board thus far. And so I want to see, all right, if the market does a leg up tomorrow off of CPI data, how much more further are we looking at in some of these big pivotal names that we can pretty much look at in the tech sector itself, right? Otherwise, what are some key levels that we end up needing to hold if we end up pretty much getting a leg down? All right. So that's what I kind of wanted to kind of just go over, kind of go through a few different names, probably especially the big three names that actually hold up most of the market, the Tesla, the Microsoft, and Apple. And then the other thing to also be notable is that we also do have earnings that's basically going to be kicking off on Friday. So those are pretty much the things to kind of just look at from a background perspective. And then, of course, I mentioned I'll get into some levels off of some key pivotal names. All right. Lobo, you want me to take a look at Netflix and EMPH? I did hear that EMPH actually fell off a cliff. I remember that most certainly. So I will keep an eye on that one. Definitely, I will take a look at it. We'll see what's going on with her, and I'll take a look at those other names, Prachi as well. All right. Just quick thing to actually just note though, looking at SPY real quick before I kind of move into some of those individual names. The most notable thing here is looking at the daily is that two things. One, you actually have a nice little gap fill that you've just basically touched into off of that little end of day rip that we had. And that's going to complete right around that 396 half mark. And then the other notable thing is that as we approach going into that 200-day EMA off of the daily here, sitting at 398, in which case, if we are going to end up testing that 200-day EMA, it's more than plausible the fact that all eyes are going to be on that $400 mark on SPY. So that's going to be the big pivotal level is that 400 mark. And if we see any kind of continuation, depending more so upon how big of a gap up we get off of CPI data, I believe the top end of this range that we're looking at to kind of close out the week here would be trading up towards 404. We trade above 404, then we're likely looking at a downtrend break for this little bear market that we've been in thus far. And if you actually notice as I kind of pull out the chart here, you will actually notice you have a very well defined downtrend resistance, and above that 404 mark would basically take out that daily downtrend resistance. All right, so 404 is that big mental number that I'm looking at for me personally. I think the 400 mark, if you already put it at the 200-day EMA at 398, it's more than plausible that we can even tap 200. The bigger key is going to be making sure if we do end up popping above the 200-day EMA, do we end up holding it or do we give it all back? That's going to be something also notable that you want to pay attention to, because I can see a case where, all right, market gives us a quick indication, we see a quick reflexive move, we trade up to 398, tap 400, but then we can end up giving up all those gains as we go into the earnings here. All right, so that's something that's notable that I definitely want to pay attention to as we push north of 400. Do we end up trying to build a base at 398 off of that 200 EMA, or do we end up giving it back? All right. And then the other notable thing is that if we end up getting a leg down off of CPI data tomorrow, the big level that I want to see us hold and at least base off of or get a strong reversal is going to be down at this 387 mark. That's the level that I want to see. All right, if we do see some blood on the street tomorrow, can we end up holding that 387 by the end of the week here? And we'll see a little bit of a reflexive move, like I mentioned, as we go into the earnings here. All right, so that's pretty much just quick basis of what I'm looking at with SPY. If we don't hold the 387 mark, I think that's more so when I'm gonna necessarily flip to a bearish case scenario, and we're likely gonna end up dropping much further below 387. All right, that's more so that 387 is more so my bottom line for us to kind of hold this little bull to neutral case as we go into earnings. All right. Now, let me actually get into some of these names that you guys actually mentioned, and then I'll kind of go off of the names that I want to look at on these larger scales. But Netflix will be first. We'll kind of look here and see what's going on with Netflix. I actually did have a very pivotal level noted here on Netflix. That big level that I was particularly watching is trading up towards that 351 half, roughly, is what I'm looking at. That was the level. If we actually kind of track back towards dating, historically, looking at our COVID lows as well. That COVID low, off of that COVID low, that was basically at that 351 levels where we ended up getting continuation of that reversal, taking us to a new all-time high off of this. So that was a 351 level that we ended up getting off of that for that reversal to all-time highs. Then the 351 level was also where, if you notice, we ended up breaking down off of the all-time highs. We based that 351 before we got the next strong move towards our bear market low on Netflix. So 351 level, that's the big key level that I'm looking at, is that 351 mark. I believe that we're going to get there potentially. It's just going to be a matter of how long until we get there. Because obviously, if we get a leg down off of CPI data, that will not as that could potentially either kill that momentum that we have going for it. Obviously, if things end up being south and we get a hot number, but if we get, I don't anticipate it being a hot number, put it that way. But we could end up kind of retracing back down as low as that 20 EMA at 284, and then we could end up kind of getting a base before we build that next leg up. It'd be my case. All right. But as I see it right now, and how I would pretty much look at it, is that I expect us to get that leg up. That's just what I'm looking at. And no matter what, it's just knowing a matter of levels, right? We always say, just play the levels. I would more so certainly say that if as long as we hold 308, 309 here, I think you should be fine. We'll trade right back up. But if we break down below 308, that's where I'll be concerned that you trade right back down to the 20 EMA off of the weekly here, and that takes us down to 284. All right, but key level, I think that's what you really wanted to know, was 351 half is the resistance you're looking for. All right, let's see the other one you mentioned real quick, and I will go down the list here in just a quick second, guys. Off of the chat here. Let's see what's going on with MPH. I do have a gap here. I assume that's pretty much off of the daily, and we did tap that gap. A nice little potential reversal off of that gap fill though, that we have incomplete. So a nice move off of that. What would be plausible here is that, okay, we've held that 208 EMA for quite some time, dating back towards what is the beginning of July here, and we ended up breaking off. The fact that we had such a strong reversal, just dipping into about halfway mark of this gap fill, I would say that it's plausible to end up retesting that 208 EMA up towards 254, call it 255, and that would be ideally the sweet spot to pretty much look to go short on this yet again. All right. Otherwise, if you break above 255, the next level above that is going to be trading up towards 263 is what I'm going to be looking at. So 263 is the level to trade above 255. Otherwise, 255 should potentially be your short, and you look to trade it back down towards the gap fill, looking for, I want to say, a little bit of a decent expiration, not necessarily going towards this week or next week. I think you play it safe. More so trying to get into a put debit spread, and you kind of play that out at least 3 weeks would be more than plausible. All right. EMPH also has a double top. Yeah, the double top is more so what ended up causing such a strong leg to the downside. You could basically call it, I think it's already been about $100 move to the downside since it did double top. But the fact that you already defended the halfway mark of this gap fill and you got a nice, pretty decent reversal off of this thus far, and makes it plausible that, all right, what was the breakdown level that was most notable? It was that 200 EMA. So it would make sense to retest that 200 EMA, test it as a resistance, reject, and then come right back down for a completion of the gap fill. But then there's also the flip case scenario, which we always have to think about. If you break back above the 200 EMA, back above that 255, then that's why I say the next level will be 263 to trade right back up. All right. Let's go on the list real quick. Prachi SPY has head and shoulder daily and inverse head and shoulder on weekly. I will say that's exactly what's most conflicting about going into the CPI. I think that's why it feels so much more critical about the CPI, as everyone feels a little bit more flustered in terms of the direction of move. All right, because it just feels like the number is going to be so sensitive in terms of how drastically the market's going to move in either direction. Is more so what also makes us more conflicting. All right. By the way, Atong, I did go through SPY. I was pretty much talking about the fact that I was looking for us to trade up towards 398. Above 398, that's going to put us at our mental number of 400 on SPY. And my top end of the range was trading up to 404. Otherwise, flip case scenario, if we get a leg down, I'm looking to at least hold 387 for a reversal, for a base to build, and to see if we can potentially hold that as we go into next week. All right. Let's see as I kind of go through some other names here. Prachi, let me get to your Alta. I did not forget about that. Let's see what's going on with Alta. Is this actually a new all-time high on Alta? I know this name has actually been monstrous. This is a new all-time high on Alta. Let's see if we can get actually pull up a overhead resistance, which I think we already cracked, which we did end up breaking. So that was a beautiful break out of that overhead resistance that we had, a beautiful push that we had. The long signal on that was to go long over this 459 mark was where you potentially wanted to go long. Now, next levels of resistance that I'm looking at for Alta here. The next pivotal level is going to be breaking over this 504 mark is what I'm looking at. Over 504, then this trades to 513. All right, so 504, it's going to be 504 and then 513 is your two next pivotal levels. I would favor a pullback though for a potential dip buy kind of opportunity here, and I believe you can end up getting this right back down. Roughly around 482 is what I'm looking at for support. So I think that's pretty much the notable support that you want to pay attention to is this 482. But otherwise, like I mentioned, 504 and then 513 is those two key levels to watch on continuation to the upside. All right. But that is a hell of a breakout. I know that alt has been ultra strong, even despite all market conditions. That was, it looked like a diamond top, actually, to be honest with you. At one given point, before we had this little pop here dating back towards August 22nd, it looked like it was setting up a little bit of a diamond top type of action here. But once we ended up getting this leg up dating back towards this, just about beginning of September, that's when it looked like it was basically invalidating that diamond top action. And that was a hell of a breakout off of that overhead resistance. All right. Let's see what else is going on. What else? The other name? The other name you mentioned was FSLR. Let's see what's going on with FSLR. Another one pushing all-time highs. It looks like. Nope, not quite. Okay, yeah, I did not look at this historically. There we go. Let's see if we can get into a 5-day chart. Give us a little bit of more of a better room. So here's what I will say. Your support is pretty much lying at 164. 164 half is where I have support sitting at. If you're looking for the next leg to the upside here for FSLR, then your next pivotal level that you're looking at, and this will more so be my price target and what I'm looking at for your next leg to the downside or potential micro leg on any kind of given pullback more so is 187. All right. So 187 will be the next pivotal level is what I'm looking at for continuation on the upside. That still gives you about $14 of room to the upside here to trade. If I wanted to say where I would potentially look to more so buy this, I think that 164 is more than plausible to kind of get a little bit of a dip buy if you're not in a position already. All right. Let's see as I go down the list. What else is there pretty much to look into? Um, uni Unicron, can I look into INTC? Intel? Let's see what's going on with Intel. This thing has been brutal. I will say that. It's been absolutely brutal. Pull this out towards the weekly. Let's see what's going on with her. Next little reversal that we've had thus far. Finding some resistance right at this 20-day EMA. I would look for support more so. If you can find support, right around 28.78 is what I'm looking at for support. So 28.78 is your support level. You want to see continuation above this 29.76 that you're just holding above right now for the close. And you want to see a push right above that. Next level of resistance that I'm looking at for Intel here is sitting at 30.62. So 30.62 is your next level of resistance. Above 30.62, then that will take you up trading towards 32.68 is what I'm looking at for next level of resistance. All right. But those are pretty much your two targets that I would say to be moderate for that. Let's see, going down the list, what else are we looking at? Lisa, you mentioned Microsoft. Let's take a look at Microsoft. So Microsoft is actually one of the names I was pretty much starting out talking about the fact that I was basically going to look at levels in which, obviously, if we get a pop tomorrow, we continue this little micro rally that we had. I wanted to see pretty much those pivotal levels in which we've ended up having a nice little continuation from when we actually made our all-time highs, and also where we ended up breaking down as we had this bear market kind of break down through some pivotal levels. All right. And why do I say this? Because what I'm looking at on Microsoft here is that I'm looking for continuation. If we can get continuation here above this 238, I'm watching for us to trade up towards 243, and that's also testing our 20-day EMA. But if you also notice, that's basically where we based off of dating back towards June of 2021 before we launched for continuation towards all-time highs. That's where we ended up basing as support dating back towards June 22nd off of our last micro little bear market rally that we had. And then that's the level that I want to see. Can we find acceptance off of that 243 mark near that 20-day EMA for continuation to the upside? Or do we end up testing that as a resistance and we come right back down? So it still gives us a lot of wiggle room in terms of getting another leg up off of this core CPI data tomorrow. That is still roughly trading from 235 to 243. That's still about a near $8 upside that we're still looking at. And that will be plausible to see. All right, once we get to that 243 mark, how do we end up reacting once we get to 243? Do we find acceptance? Do we trade higher? Or do we end up getting a rejection and we trade right back down? All right. So that's going to be what I particularly want to see. If I kind of dial down, particularly I can do this down towards the 5 day. But if you actually notice, you have a little bit of a head and shoulders action that could play out. You have a left shoulder, you have a head. And if we trade up, particularly even towards this 243 mark that I mentioned, we could see this curl and reject and curl right back down to form a head and shoulders. And we trade right back to the downside. So that's something else if you're looking at formation pattern wise. That would be something that's also plausible to kind of play the factor of what I was mentioning as finding acceptance. But if we reject, that will be your bear case scenario, rejecting off of that 243 mark. All right. So let's see what else there is. Anything else that I need to look at here that you guys mentioned? Atong, you brought 405 calls. 404 is more so the top end of the range that I was particularly looking at. I think that'll be more than acceptable for you to be in profits. And that is more so where I would look to see if I secure some profits at least once you get up to that 404 mark that I'm looking at to kind of top out this little leg that we're on. All right. Moving on to some other names that I kind of wanted to just go through, like I mentioned, Tesla is another one. I kind of capped off the YouTube mentioning the fact that since our low that we ended up putting in down at 102 here, you want to say, and now we already made about a 20 plus move off of Tesla from that recent low. It's already been a monstrous move, but what are some pivotal levels I'm going to look? Well, I want to see if we get a leg down, can we hold 117 half? If we hold 117 half, or if we get the leg up more so tomorrow, for to continue this momentum. I'm looking to trade up to 135, and then above 135, the level that I actually have us topping out at is near this 146. In which case, where I say topping out is that we could see that mental level 150 trade, but I don't believe that we trade above 150, right? And that level, that 146 to 150, basically also illustrates where we had dating back towards November of 2020. That's where we had a nice bullpen in action that we ended up breaking out of resistance to launch towards new highs. So that is also what makes this more so a very pivotal level. And then we end up getting a nice little breakdown, a retest off of that near 150 mark before we got our most recent bear market low. All right, so 146 to 150, that's the range more so that I'm looking at to give you a better idea. If we get a leg up, I think it's more than plausible that we'll likely see another 25, 27 point move to the upside to trade near that 150 mark. If indeed we end up able to hold 117 or we get another strong leg off of core CPI data to the upside. All right. And then the last one that I wanted to illustrate, I believe, was more so Apple. Looking at this one, another one that's had a strong move. We didn't even get down towards the 200-day EMA just yet, or quite yet rather, off of the weekly. But if we get another leg, I want to see us trade above 135 here. We trade above 135. I'm going to be looking for us to trade up towards 138 is my pivotal level that I'm watching. That's basically where we had a nice little ascending triangle dating back towards August of 2020 up until the breakout that we had that was about June 2021. We had a nice little base support test October 21st. Another reversal attempt off of that same pivotal level with that 138. And now, as I mentioned, it being a pivotal level, let's see, do we end up hitting 138 as resistance or do we find acceptance to trade higher above that off of CPI data? So that's going to be how I want to see it, particularly off of these key levels. How do we end up closing out the week going into these pivotal levels? Is more so what I hope you kind of got the trend out of, is what I'm more so looking at, especially with these three names Apple, Microsoft, and Tesla. I'm looking for those pivotal levels that we ended up trading, whether it be a year or two ago. I want to see, do we find acceptance back above those pivotal levels or do we reject and we go right back down? As we know, the market has pretty much been giving us lackluster type of reversals and it's been very short term. All right. So those are pretty much things that I just wanted to outline. I kind of just pinpointed the ones that I really wanted to outline here as I went through hopefully some of the names that you guys wanted me to take a look at. One other thing that I kind of just wanted to give you a quick reminder. We also do have, for those of you that are not members, you're not pretty much standard members. We do actually have a promo going on right now, by the way. If you actually drop the promo code number 5050 and then type out the word premium, all one word, that will actually give you 50% off your first month of premium. So that's actually something I just wanted to pretty much give you a heads up. That actually ends on Friday. So hopefully you guys can take advantage of that. But again, that promo code is the number 5050 and then type out premium, all one word. All right. So other than that, though, I will leave it a little bit short and sweet there. Hopefully, we'll see what ends up happening tomorrow. We'll see if we get the leg up. Then we could talk a little bit more about some pivotal levels that we're likely going to be approaching, and we'll see what goes from there. All right. But other than that, appreciate you guys joining us.